In today's installment of Journalists Are Upset About Their Waning Relevance, we have Toxic Fandom, how Hollywood is battling fans who are just out for blood, from social media boot camps to superfan focus groups. Now that article title is a pinch combative, but the contents of the article itself is actually a pinch interesting as, well, there is some truth in this. There are fans who are just out for blood. I count myself amongst them because, well, here's the thing. You have been actively hurting things I like for a very long time now, and I have come to the realization, through great deals of experience, that the only ways to make you stop hurting the thing I like is by hurting you in turn. Only once the big entertainment industry giants are also feeling the burn of touching the hot stove do we actually get something worthwhile, but we'll get into that a bit more later, no doubt. On August 28th, Amanda Sternberg decided to make up a story to see if she could get some sort of media attention. She failed, unfortunately for her. It's not a huge shock for me, Sternberg signed, since the series was announced in 2020. She continued, we started experiencing a rampage of, I would say, hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol. This, of course, has to do with Star Wars Acolyte, of course. Now, none of this hyper-conservative vitriol was ever actually presented, as far as I'm aware, but I'm sure it was there somewhere. Absolutely. In other words, the Acolyte was the latest high-profile target of the toxic fandom. Yes. If in toxic you mean wants quality Star Wars products, then yes. The catch-all term for when fan criticism curdles from good faith dissatisfaction into a relentless negative. Now this part is rather interesting. Good faith dissatisfaction. What exactly is good faith dissatisfaction? Because if you're meaning here an honest dislike of the product, then that's the Acolyte. I didn't hate the Acolyte because Amanda Sternberg was the incorrect color. I hated the Acolyte because it was genuinely awful. It was an unironically terrible piece of entertainment. One of the worst I've ever had the displeasure of sitting through. Unironically, I would rather go back to Rings of Power than I would the Acolyte, okay? That's the level we're talking about here. Is that not good faith enough? Or do you mean watch it, will complain about it mildly, and then continue to consume product? Because I don't actually think that's good faith. See, you get the industry you create for yourself. This is something we've seen in video games for years and years now. Whenever a abusive content policy gets into the general public and it's accepted, like DLC, for example. Once the horse armor for Oblivion was laughed off as a simple joke that didn't harm anyone, very soon DLC was all we got, to the point where today the expansion pack is basically eradicated. Whenever we begin to accept one of these negative practices, it very swiftly becomes industry standard. And since we did not have a large enough outcry against wokeism initially, it too became the industry standard. Gamers and fans of Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, etc., have all learned by now that the only way to get your voice heard is to shout very, very loudly. A good faith discourse does not benefit us when the opposition is not also acting in good faith. Often bigoted online campaigning as either project or its stars or creative leaders, you mean the primary criminals, against either in the franchise economy increasingly dependent upon established audience devotion to drive the bottom line. Now that is an interesting observation, because there's something we've said for ages now. The wider audience is largely a myth. It is created not by you, but by us. We create the wider audience. The geekdom audience that you create initially, they are the bud from which the wider audience will eventually spring. Star Wars started out as a fairly small fandom and then grew and grew over the years due to the passion of its fans. Creative Assembly's Total War began as a very niche title that grew and grew due to the devotion of its fans. Without a core of people who are actually willing to argue your product's case to others, you will not grow. And this is an observation we have seen again and again and again, and one that Hollywood and entertainment and gaming is only now very slowly beginning to realize. Establish audience devotion to drive the bottom line. If you do not satisfy the fans, you will not be profitable. This is the single most valuable observation that the industry has made over the course of the last 10 years. And it's remarkable it's taken them this long to make it, but hey, we might actually finally be here. The threat of toxic fandoms poisoning that enthusiasm has become a seemingly intractable headache for almost every studio, and it's only getting worse because you keep producing shit. Here's the thing. The fandom isn't poisoning that enthusiasm. That toxic fandom, that is the devoted audience. This is what you're conflating. As again and again now, we have proven with the Acolyte being the most resounding point of proof of all. We have proven with Lord of the Rings, we have proven with video gamings, the majority of your audience is what you refer to as the toxic audience. By your own metric, they are the majority. So maybe you should start catering to them. It comes with the territory, but has gotten incredibly loud in the last couple of years as a veteran marketing executive at a major studio. People are just out for blood regardless. They think the purity of the first version will never be replaced, or you're done something to upset the canon of a beloved franchise, and they're going to take you down for doing so. Correct. Oh god. Finally, this lesson is beginning to sink into the mind of entertainment producers. Yes, if you fuck with the things we love, we are going to come after you for it. This is not a difficult concept to understand. But if you expect to actually create something that we value, that we like, you will be rewarded for it with money. This is not a difficult concept. It's not an abusive one. It's extraordinarily simple and extraordinarily fair. You give me a product I wish to purchase, and I will give you money. Simple. Do not give me a product that I wish to purchase, and I will yell at you for it. Literally, this is the most fundamental part of capitalism ever discovered. Sometimes toxic fandoms behave reactively. A House of the Dragon episode featuring two female characters kissing, an episode of The Last of Us focusing on a gay couple, were both review bombed. Yes, because these are elements of a political agenda that we have grown very, very good at identifying, and sometimes to our detriment. I would argue that, was it Bill and Ted or something in The Last of Us? I would argue that we should have claimed these characters. We should have made them into, in essence, MAGA Americans, building a community with their own sweat and defending it with lethal force against all outsiders. How on God's good earth is that not a MAGA value, far before it is a wokest one? But the House of the Dragon, it's garbage. I don't understand why people like it. I do not get it. I really don't. Are the characters good? No. Are the characters attractive? God help me, no. Is it a woke show? Oh boy, yes. Girl bosses ahoy from stem to stern. And now lesbianism as well. House of the Dragon gets far more credit than it deserves, but this only goes to show how easy it actually is to appease the toxic fandom. Give them so much as the vague outlines of quality, and they will praise your name up into the sky. The Jedi Outcast game was a wonderful example of that. Jedi Outcast was not a supremely good Star Wars lightsaber combat game, but it was adequate. And in a period of absolute famine, adequate is good enough. It's bread when you're starving. The practice of mobbing sites like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb with negative user reviews, which gained mainstream attention following the premiere of 2017 Star Wars The Last Jedi. An entire YouTube ecosystem is devoted to declaring projects like The Marvels and The Boys woke garbage, among other pungent sobriquets. Sobriquets? Oh, that's a nice word. And yes, no, it is, because we are changing culture. You, at Variety, you have created your vision of culture. We don't like it, so we're uprooting it, and it turns out we're a lot better at it than you. Sucks. Just as frequently, the backlash begins before the project has seen the light of day. A Reddit mega thread dedicated to outright overbridgedom, casting a black woman, Mazil Badsu, as the love interest for Francesca Hannah Dodd. The social media epithets directed at the actors of color cast as elves and dwarves in The Lord of the Rings and His Power, death threats aimed at Leslie Jones to impress tour for 2016 Ghostbusters, and so on. Yes, because we don't actually need to see the product to be able to judge it. We have seen enough media to be able to judge a media based upon its presentation. You show me a trailer, I'm probably going to develop a pretty good idea of what you're trying to sell to me. And if it has elements of overt wokeism, like black elves for example, then yes, we will call it out for it. You see, isn't it? This is one of those almost old-school gaming arguments, like, oh, it's just a beta. You can't judge the game on just a beta. Oh, it's just in early access. You can't judge the game on early access. Oh, it's only been out a week, etc., etc. No, you can absolutely judge a product based on its early state. You can judge it based upon what it is right then and what it is likely to become. For example, Terra Invicta. Terra Invicta had a somewhat rocky start, but still relatively solid. This tells me that the developers are competent enough to actually create what they want to make. They have the ability to make good on their promise of an epic war conflict, and thus I am willing to give them the time to actually do it. However, if with Rings of Power you demonstrate to me from episode goddamn 1 that you don't know what you're doing and that you have nothing but loathing for the subject matter, I don't need to watch episode 2 to know that you're pissing in my face. Literally, it is that simple. If you're already shitting on me, I don't need to wait for the final turd to fall before I declare you to be an asshole. Perhaps the greatest irony of this phenomenon is the disproportionate impact these toxic fandoms have relative to their actual number. Cope and seethe, my dear. I know you keep thinking that you're in the majority, and this is in essence what the last 10-odd years have been about. It is the wokies going, no, we're the majority, let's show those chuds, and the rest of us going, I don't think so, I think we're the majority. And it turns out, we were right. We made the more persuasive argument with a firmer moral basis, rather than your absolute lack of anything that even resembles morality. And that is why we are the majority. If it was just the relative to their actual numbers, if they were just the minority, how have they toppled every woke show? How have they toppled The Acolyte? How have they toppled Rings of Power? You do not topple productions from studios of this size unless you actually have control over a substantial quantity of the purse strings in question, the viewers' purse strings. The vast majority of any fandom are casual fans, says John Van Sitters, VP of Star Trek Brand Development, who has been with the solid franchise in the 1990s. The number of people who live and die on their franchise are very, very few, and then those who after the things that they espouse to, then those who come after things that they espouse to love with Venom are a really, really tiny subset of that already small subset of fandom. It is just much easier to see it now. I don't know that it is really that much more than where things were in 1995. It's just that the Bullhorn wasn't there. Incorrect. The entertainment was better in 1995. The dissatisfaction was not there. Now there is dissatisfaction. Okay. Let's assume that you're correct, right? That there is just this very small portion of the fandom that is now getting louder. Why are they getting louder? It's because you're ruining the thing they like. Simple as. And even then, they gave you 10 years of the benefit of the doubt. Only recently, as you say, has it actually grown truly loud. And yet again, this is all reality, right? Politics is the 2% arguing over the 98, but this is where we make the argument. Our argument is, you are making woke garbage. And then we approach the majority of the casual fans, and that is true, the majority are relatively casual fans, and we go, this, and this is our argument for why this is bad. And then you make the argument, oh, they're just chuds and fascists. And it turns out that our argument was simply better. That's why your projects are failing. For some, combating the Bullhorn amounts to acting as if they can't hear it. Oh, please do continue with that. Particularly when it's negative, toxic conversation we don't even engage, says TV marketing executive. Like with toxic people, you try to not give it too much oxygen. You are not the determining factor there. That's the problem. You have no power over us. None whatsoever. We are past the time of the access media. You cannot simply run to Variety for a positive coverage of your product. It is the YouTubers, for better or worse, and sometimes it can absolutely be both, that determine the success of a franchise right now. One day, that will undoubtedly change, but for right now, that is the reality you have to deal with. One principal concern is that reacting to these kinds of attack risk alienating fans who are unhappy with creative choices about a franchise but haven't tipped over into abusive behavior. So many studios attempt to amplify friendlier voices instead. We'll reply to comments that are positive and elevate those things, says the TV executives. You will stick your head in the dirt like an ostrich and pretend that nothing is happening. Again, your amplification is worthless. When somebody goes to a brand account and sees the brand account retweeting positive comments, do you think they are going to believe that is genuine? Do you believe that they are going to think, oh, the brand just picked this one out of random? No, we understand you are attempting to protect brand. That is why the negative comment has more weight to it. The one you try to hide is the one that we will seek out. Still, toxic fandoms have grown so pernicious that they've become a fact of life for many, and so powerful that while talent executives and publicists will privately bemoan the issue, fear of inadvertently triggering another backlash kept several studios from speaking for this story even on background. As one writer put it, it's just a lose-lose. Correct. This is what is so nice about this article, because it teaches us a very valuable thing. Fear has finally set in amongst these people. They have finally realized that there is something to be afraid of. We have the stick, and we will wield it with great determination and frequency, because you have shown us that it is the only means of communicating with you. Stick, and more stick is our only option. And if we didn't want it to be this way, you have made it this way. And the very fact that people now refuse to comment on articles is absolutely beautiful. It's fantastic. Those who did talk with Variety all agreed that the best defense is to avoid provoking fandoms in the first place. In addition to standard focus group testing, studios will assemble a specialized cluster of superfans to assess possible marketing materials for a major franchise project. They are very vocal, said the studio exec. They will just tell us if you do that, fans are going to retaliate. These groups have even led studios to alter the project. If it is early enough and the movie isn't finished yet, we can make those kinds of changes. And that is good if you are finding the right people. See, superfans is an Amazon term, where they collected a bunch of superfans for the Rings of Power that never even watched the show when it came out, that had no connection to the Lord of the Rings, and didn't even review it on their channels later on. For them, a trip to the premiere of Rings of Power was a all expenses paid vacation, and that was all it ever was. This is the problem. You need to find the actual fans, not those who claim to be so for wokeist reasons. And interestingly, on Inside Out 2, we saw a couple of weeks ago an article that basically said that the developers were, the filmmakers were hounded to make things less gay. No, you can't have this sexual innuendo around a 13-year-old girl. No, you cannot suggest they are in some sort of relationship. It needs to be as platonic as possible. And now rumors are coming out that this also happened with X-Men 97 as well. There appears to now be finally a group of executives within these companies that understand what we are asking of them. And with Inside Out 2, they were financially rewarded for it as well. Several studio insiders say they often put their talent through a social media bootcamp. In some cases, when a character is intentionally challenging a franchise status quo, studios will, with the actor's permission, take over their social media accounts entirely, so as to shut them the F up. When things get really bad, especially involving threats of violence, security firms will scrub talent information from the internet to protect them from doxing, or to make them more difficult targets more correctly, to remove the person off the internet. And bear in mind here, this is not the company protecting their talent. The company does not give a shit about their talent. This is why they didn't do this in the past. But now, if you speak out in a negative way and you piss off the fans, the company will wipe the talent off the face of the earth in order to protect their product. And that is, in essence, the gist of all of this. The fear has finally begun to set in. And that is the best thing that has happened in the last 10 years, making the producers of entertainment afraid of their audiences rather than their political activists. This is how we will get entertainment back on track again. The stick, and evermore the stick is the answer to this problem. And don't you forget it. Don't even forget it when they try to give us something good. Keep applying the stick for a good 5-6 years, even when they are giving us what you want. Withhold the praise. Be gentle with it. Oh, this was pretty good. And then, simply reward them with watching it or buying the product. It really is that simple. It really is that simple. Good product come out, purchase good product. If good product looks suspicious, yell at product. Because at the end of the day, the only things that matter here is that I get a good product and you get money. It is the simplest exchange imaginable, yet it is one that we have struggled for 10 years to return to. I'm just glad we're finally beginning to see it again. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.